Galaea and Githindor had been spending some time in the pleasant company of Princess Takaya. She had been keen to share the Dragonborn history with them. Wherever Takaya went, her dragon sibling Tak was never far behind. Galaea was keen to know more about the dragon siblings. She had read a factual account in their high library, but was keen to hear it at first hand. Takaya explained that all dragonborn babelings, when born, had a dragon egg placed in their crib beside them. The dragon embryo, as it developed in the egg beside them, would take on the same colouring, features, and personality as the dragonborn babe to whom it was given. They experienced the same shared emotions and feelings and would loyally defend their dragonborn siblings in any situation. When the tiny dragon hatched, it would be given the first syllable of the babeling's name as its own, hence the name Tak for Takaya's sibling. The siblings were never far from each other, developing an unbreakable bond between them. So much so that if either was injured or died, the same would happen to the other. Just as Takaya was gentle, kind and sweet-natured, so too was Tak, who also had the same pale eyes and scales. However, do not be fooled, Takaya said. Tak is a dragon after all, and she could be extremely fierce if provoked or angered. The dragons could not speak, but made themselves understood with low growls, purrs, and rasping noises that their siblings could understand. Galaea and Githindor soon became accustomed to the small dragons that each accompanied their siblings throughout the castle. In contrast, Prince Voldhar's dragon sibling, Vol, was black and shiny, with piercing, watery orange eyes. It usually skulked around Voldhar's shoulders or slithered along the floor beside him. After their brief and uncomfortable introduction, Prince Voldhar was absent from Galaea and Githindor's company, as he had taken himself off to the training ground, where he felt more at ease amongst the dragonborn warriors. The court bored him, and the company of his high elf betrothed and her dull brother even more so. It angered him to see that an attraction was developing between his sister Takaya and the high elven prince, and he was determined to be rid of him back to his kingdom as soon as possible. It had been a necessary arrangement for himself to be betrothed to the high elven princess, a matter of politics, and a way of securing a foothold within the high elven kingdom of ERYNDEL, which was a powerful neighbour. However, the bloodline of the Ormond High Dragonborn must not be watered down any further by interracial bonding, and Takaya must be bonded with another of the High Dragonborn. Aldher and Jehadra's journey was nearly at an end, as they arrived at the castle just before sundown after a 3-day ride. King Gerwan and Queen Alina were glad of Aldher's return and greeted Jehadra warmly. The two mages wasted no time in sharing their findings with King Gerwan, and then spent the evening in the great elven library perusing the ancient tome that was the Book of Light. Jehadra told Aldher that according to her charts, it was almost time for the strange alignment of planets to once again be seen in the heavens, as it was now the season before the next long night approached. She had a sense of something magical when her hands touched the book, and the now recognizable constellation on the front of the cover began to glow very faintly. Together they approached the open windows of the great library and the terrace outside. The cool night breeze touched their faces as they looked skyward. Indeed, the moon was already beginning to wane, and around it, Jehedra pointed out the constellation, very faintly around the moon. "Do you see it?" she said. "It is beginning." They looked at each other in wonder. Merowyn was quite exhausted after her long swim across the bay of the Enchanted Sea, and finally reached the mouth of the River Erin. She briefly stopped to rest before continuing on up the river through the Cascades Valley until she eventually reached the group of small waterfalls which were locally named the Five Sisters. Here there was a small pier where elven fishing boats often moored as they brought home a day's catch. Today all was quiet, much to Merowyn's relief. She beached herself on the sandy bank near the pier and rested. It had been a long time since she had been here, and pleasantly enjoyed taking in the peaceful ambience of her surroundings. The sound of the cascading sisters, the gentle breeze in nearby willow trees, and an occasional screech of a mountain eagle. She smiled to herself. Looking down, she saw the orb in its sack laying quiet, no longer pulsing with strange lights as it had in the lost underwater kingdom as the boat passed overhead. Merowyn knew how close they had come to disaster if Lord Org had managed to retrieve the orb from the sea. Merowyn was eager to pass the orb over to Prince Galdor, and her eyes searched the mountain passes for any sign of his horse, hoping that her guardians had managed to get an owl message sent to him. Looking around her, she could see some discarded shells thrown out from a catch on the beach. She found a large conch and began to blow into it. The sound reverberated through the mountains, echoing through the hills. She hoped the prince would hear it. Indeed, Prince Galdor had received the owl message from the merfolk, and he was making his way this very evening through the mountain passes from the royal castle of Fjellfjothren. In the distance, he heard the faint sound of the conch, and knew immediately that Merowyn must already be here. As Galdor approached the river shore, he saw Merowyn beached by the fishing pier. He dismounted and joined her there. She looked tired and weakly unhooked the net bag from around her waist that held the orb. Galdor took it and turned it over in his hands. Looking at it now, it held no sign of magic, just a cold orb of stone with mysterious markings on its surface. "You must take it and guard it now, Your Highness," said Merowyn urgently. "Org came far too close to the orb. He has now sensed it. He will soon follow. I can feel it." "You must rest," said Galdor, "and eat." "Oh, don't worry about me," she said. "I will be fine. I will return home soon. But please, you must take the orb, now." Galdor nodded. He mounted his horse and attached the orb to his saddle, and then bade farewell to Merowyn with his heartfelt thanks, before returning up the mountainside to Fjellfjothren. It was a cool evening. The now small waning moon spread her pale silver light across the sky. Down in the gardens of the Dragonborn castle, two figures moved together, arm in arm, through the dappled moonlit trees. Githandor and Takaya were speaking in gentle, hushed tones. Moonlight lit their faces as they looked into each other's eyes. their love blossoming deeper with every secret meeting. Takaya's dragon sibling, Tark, followed behind them like an obedient servant. But they were not alone. From the shadows of the trees, another pair of eyes burned like hot coals. Voldhar had observed them from his tower. He had had enough of this. It was time to confront the elf. He stepped out of the shadows into the moonlight, tall and dark, his half-dragon features sharp and proud, and his orange eyes glowing. Slithering at his side was Vol, his dragon sibling, larger than Takaya's, with shiny black scales and orange eyes that reflected its master's fury. "You disgrace our house," he spat at Takaya, his voice striking out like a blade. Githindor stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between Voldhar and Takaya. "This is no disgrace," Githindor said steadily. "It is affection, freely given." Voldhar's lip curled slightly, revealing a fang. "Freely given," he said. "You presume much, elf." Takaya moved forward, her hand tightening on Githindor's sleeve. "Brother, please," she pleaded. "I care for him." The words hung fragile in the air. Voldhar's dragon lifted its head, its wings twitching. "You shame, Ormond," Voldhar said coldly. "You would bind yourself freely to this insipid elven dreamer, while I am forced into an alliance like a bargain in token." "But that was not my doing," Takaya whispered. Githindor's voice hardened. "My sister's betrothal to you is no fault of Takaya's." Voldhar's eyes flared. "And yet it binds us all." Then the tension snapped. Takaya's dragon hissed, a small sharp sound. Voldhar's dragon answered with a low growl, smoke curling from its nostrils. "Call him off," Githindor said quietly. Voldhar's expression darkened. "He feels what I feel." The black dragon leapt from Voldhar's side. In a flash of beating wings and snapping jaws, it struck at Takaya's smaller dragon. The garden erupted into chaos. Takaya cried out as her dragon took flight, her pale wings beating frantically. The two small dragons clashed midair, claws slashing, teeth flashing in silver moonlight. "Stop this!" Takaya screamed. But the bond between Dragonborn and dragon was not so easily commanded. Emotion fed it. And Voldhar was pure fury. The black obsidian dragon was stronger, driven by rage. It slammed into Takaya's dragon, sending it reeling along the walkway. Githindor drew his blade, not towards Voldhar, but toward the dragon. "Githindor, no!" Takaya gasped. "You cannot interfere! You cannot harm them!" But now the obsidian dragon had seized her sibling by the wing, teeth sinking deep. The pale dragon shrieked in agony, and so did Takaya, as she dropped to her knees, clutching her own shoulder as blood welled through her gown where phantom wounds appeared. It was the bond. They felt each other's pain. Githindor saw it, and immediately ran to Takaya's side. Tark retaliated with a lunge towards Vol's throat, their bodies frantically twisting and thrashing, with blood-curdling shrieks echoing through the still night air, her claws tearing into Vol's black shiny chest. And then silence. For one heartbeat, the night stood still. Takaya felt exhausted and fell into Githindor's arms. Voldhar began to stagger as his clawed hand held his throat, where blood was pouring from a phantom wound in his neck. Another dark stain spread across his chest. He looked down at it in disbelief. No, he breathed. His dragon lay motionless, its eyes dimming like dying coals. Voldhar fell, choking as though invisible claws gripped his heart. Takaya stared, horror flooding her features. "Brother! Brother!" Voldhar looked up at her, fury now gone, his eyes now a very pale watery yellow. You chose, he rasped. His body convulsed once, and then he collapsed beside his dragon, still.